part of a CBAM 2017 read-along. I've been reading the Three Theban Plays. Now, link to that read-along down below. The Three Theban Plays are Antigone, Oedipus the king, and Oedipus at Colonus. And this made me start to think about prophecies in literature, especially when reading Oedipus Rex or Oedipus the King, which is very famously centered around a prophecy. Oedipus is told that he is going to kill his father and marry his mother, and this is exactly what happens. Now, before I am going to talk about prophecies and understanding time, I'm going to explain a bit about time as, or at least present two different ways of understanding time. This is not my field of expertise. I am going to go very briefly and simply through it as I have understood it. If you want a more in-depth understanding of it, you need to find someone else. I'm a booktuber, I talk about books, but you need to sort of understand the two different ways of understanding time to really have this discussion. So, how do we understand time? Well, the most common way of understanding time is understanding time in a linear fashion. Now, a linear fashion simply means that you can draw it with a pencil, like this. So, time goes on, time goes on, time goes on. Now, so linear doesn't mean that it has to be in a straight line. So you can, for example, draw it like this, and it would still be in a linear fashion because you have a beginning and you have a hypothetical end, and kind of depending on what you're thinking about. And you can also have understanding of time as a circle in a linear fashion, which is pretty much that you start here, time goes, time goes, time goes, time goes, and then it stops. And very often you then can talk about, and then it continues, and it continues, and it continues, sort of all those different circles. But it's still in a linear fashion because you imagine it as this pen drawing the circles. So that's what it means with something being in a linear fashion. Now, what very often then happens with a linear understanding of time is that you get certain paradoxes. Now, the most common time paradox is, of course, that you can't go back and change something that means you wouldn't go back in the first place. But very often, what is considered the second time paradox when you're thinking of time linearly, even in a circular story like this, is what after the Futurama episode is referred to as "you can't be your own grandfather." And in this thinking, time is linear, so thing A happens. For example, you are born, time, you invent a time machine or go back in time, you meet your grandmother and impregnate her, which is necessary for A to happen. In a linear understanding of time, this is a paradox. This can't happen because, as we've shown when drawing the circle, something had to be there the first time around. So it doesn't start out as a circle, even if it ends up as a circle. And that's one of the core elements in understanding time in a linear fashion. And here's my question. Is this the only way of understanding time? Well, if you're going to understand time as the fourth dimension, it doesn't necessarily have to be like that. Now, in a linear understanding of the three dimension, you get graphs like this. And there you see that you have a center, and then everything expands out of that center. But if you go to some of the more recent research done on the shape of the universe, this way of understanding it is being drawn into question. And they're saying that instead of thinking it like this, it might be like blowing up a balloon. And in that sense, we're not talking about it being, again, the center of the universe blowing up, but that maybe space and time is the balloon itself. It's the plastic around the balloon. And so when we're talking about an expanding universe, it's going stuff like, so we start with this plastic like this, and then and it's expanded. And that's how it's used. So it's more like wrapping it around. And I'm not stating that the shape of the universe is the shape of a balloon. So I'm not saying that this is the universe. I'm just, because there's a lot of different ways and shapes and forms and stuff like that, but it works in a similar way. So let's look at this from our perspective. So I need to separate out that when I'm talking about linear understanding, I'm not talking about our understanding and our experience as time and space, but more time and space outside of us. So we might experience the world in this sort of sense and reality, but time and space itself is the balloon. And what's interesting about here is that if you draw a line around the balloon, you don't get the drawing of the line in a linear fashion, because if you imagine that the line is always there and then you blow up the balloon, it has expanded, but it has no beginning or end. Time as a circle has always existed as a circle, in contrast to when we draw a circle like this and end up with, well, a C when we're halfway through. So that's the two ways of understanding time. In one as the beginning and the end, and it becomes a circle, and one as always existing as a circle. So how does this matter regarding prophecies in literature? And I was briefly on this topic when talking about the universality of Shakespeare and Macbeth. I talked about the prophecy in the beginning of Macbeth and asking the question, was Macbeth doomed to have to kill the king and become king and then die, or was it just a temptation? And I said that regarding the Christian way of thinking it and the allegory with the fall of man in the Bible, that's the way you should understand it. But again, what if time is a balloon? And so you have Oedipus, who at some point, moving along in a linear fashion in a balloon and time and circle that has always been, gets the prophecy. You are going to kill your father and marry your mother. And then the question regarding deterministic is, does he have to do it, or is it just a possibility of doing it? So in a linear fashion, when he gets to the prophecy, there is no future. There is nothing before that. That part of the line hasn't been drawn yet. And in that sense, a prophecy is pretty much just good guesswork, because the future doesn't exist. But if you see here on the balloon, the future and the past already exists. So when Oedipus gets the prophecy, and the question is, does he have to kill his father and marry his mother? Maybe he really has to do it because he already has done it. It exists in his future and in his past simultaneously, because it is a closed circle that is always existed as a closed circle. And that brings up a very interesting question regarding Oedipus Rex and dramatic irony, because very often we say the dramatic irony of Oedipus Rex is that he is looking for the killer who is himself, and we as the audience know it. But maybe the real dramatic irony is the fact that the entity that is forcing Oedipus Rex to kill his father and marry his mother is himself, because he has already done it. Leave your comments down below. Tell me what you think. And remember, it's better to be a witty fool than a foolish wit.